So that is good. So you should have said. I think we're actually going to start. I'm sorry that we're about late. Hi all, good evening. My name is Barts, London Student Association President. So tonight, welcome to the BLSA Candidate Debate of 2022. So this is our chance to grill next year's team. I'm kidding. We're not going to do that, candidates. It is a really chill evening. We're going to take a couple of questions, have some discussions with some of SPC. It is a very relaxed event, so don't be too worried. I've sat in the audience too, waiting to come up, and it is stressful, but try not to be stressed. Slides. I've got some questions, but really I'd quite like to absolutely not answer any of them, and you will ask questions is the ideal. Okay, so if you can try and think of questions while we're going, that would be amazing. Direct to one, anything that in each section that they can ask. I'll take two at a time, and I'll give a minute and a half to do a couple of rounds of that. And then I'll hand over to them at the end to do a closing speech for a minute to wrap up. Which will be done in a bit of a different way. We'll do it a bit less formally, a bit sit down, and first is saying that we're being live streamed. I did write Facebook and YouTube, but maybe it's only YouTube. That's just a reminder for anything that you say tonight is being live streamed, and that's also a reminder for me and my potty mouth not to swear. And due to a multitude of reasons, we've got a bit of a smaller number of candidates tonight. That's okay, there's many reasons why people can't be here. So some candidates sent in a statement that Alvin here will read. Yeah, another reminder is about student staff protocol. If you can't specifically name staff, they're not here to make a comment back. And that is all of the announcements. In the event emergency, your exits are here. I'm done, let's start. Cool. First one is women's rap. If you could do a quick little intro.
My name's Gayatri, also known as Kay. I'm a third year medical student, and I hope to be intercalating in medical education next year.
So,
this year, there have been a lot of things run by the women's rep. What is your plans for next year? Do you have any ideas?
Hold on one sec.
Sorry.
We're trying to be, no, you're fine. I'm glad you're eager. That is a good thing. We'll.
Yeah, okay.
Anyone else? Anyone else got any questions? Okay, I'll pop in one of mine. Something that I wanted to ask is about reporting structures. So we've got things like reporting support, we've now got raising concern. Why do you think that's platform?
What are my plans for next year if I would get the role? So I've kind of split it into different sections in my head. So firstly, I will be focusing on safety, especially around the Whitechapel campuses. Not necessarily just BLSA building, but also referring to the library. I know a lot of people are put off working in the library at night just because it's not really as safe to go. I also think there needs to be more security at both floors. I was in Florian first year and the security was 100% not. So that's kind of my overview on safety. Secondly, we have so many amazing women's clubs at Barts. I just think, I know COVID has changed a lot of things, but the women's club kind of need to come together. And I think when they do forums, do activities together instead of separately, it'll be like a lot bigger of a. Finally, in terms of spikings, I know that's a big that's been raised quite a lot this year. I actually attended two of the meetings regarding the spikings, so I just think extra support for the freshers, what protocol to go into, how to deal with situations where they do.
Let's do another round. Does anyone else have any questions?
Questions in a minute.
I'm happy to give you another minute and a half to take my one.
Yeah,
I don't mind too much. Okay, let's do another minute and a half. Why do you think students don't utilise these whistleblowing systems? I'm happy to give you another minute. Okay, yes? Cool, no worries, start.
So I think the main reason why I think students don't use them is just they don't know about them. I think the way that this sort of stuff, I know for example when the spikings were going on there was an emergency number at the Griff, but no student actually knew this number, and I just think the way we actually give the information to like club members and students needs to be. So for example with sports clubs, WhatsApp groups is one of the main things that everyone checks, so I think all the major information should go into the WhatsApp groups. Facebook, Instagram, I think they just need to be posted more on social media where people would see them rather than emails. I think just not just sending out the information once, but keeping it kind of as a repeat. I know like with Sports Club, for example, for tables, they have weekly events made on Facebook. So I just think adding in like any numbers, necessary or emergency contacts on those posts won't take long, but then it's an easier referral for people to go back to.
Happy to do another round if anyone else has got any questions in the time. Any other?
Do you have any ideas of how you would improve engagement in the women's? Do you have any ideas for how you would improve engagement in the women's forums?
Okay.
What would be your biggest concern going into this role?
That was engagement in women's forums, improve that, and how. So a minute and a half to answer both, okay?
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, okay.
In terms of increasing like engagement in the events, I think again publicity is always a big thing, social media, and making use of kind of the big clubs that we have, such as netball, such as Women in Health. I think making use of them, advertising it, like then people are more likely to attend the forums and put their input in. And in terms of what my biggest concern is for, I think I would say post-COVID, obviously a lot of things have changed, and next year, so I know this year was kind of nearly normal, but next year will be a very normal. So I think in terms of that, there'll be a lot more events going on, a lot more.
I didn't do a closing statement. I'd have a minute to do a closing statement.
What, like now?
Yeah.
What
You can cut, yeah, if you want to. Sorry, my bad. Let's be fair. Sorry, my bad. Let's be fair. Sorry, Alan. That's right. I remember just before you started. instead of opening speeches, it's closing statements. So any other ideas, anything else you want to say? Sorry to drag you back.
Nice.
Anything else you want to say? If you've got social media or anything to follow, you've got a minute.
I've got a bit of an idea about what I plan on doing in the next year. Just to kind of sum up, my main focuses would be regarding safety, more engagement with all of the female clubs and potentially forums, and just being a friendly port of call, and especially freshers and the Freshers Week. Thank you for listening.
And Kai Tian, running joint for BL International Representatives. We are a pair of second-year medical and dental students. As international students ourselves, we understand the challenges that international students face. We're keen to represent the BL international student community and bring about changes to improve your experience at Barts. Our three main goals and visions are to bring BL international students together, to support BL international students, and to make BL international students' voices heard. Do have a read of our manifesto on the QMSU website to see how we plan to achieve these goals and visions. Together, we will make here a home away from home. Please vote for us. Thank you.
At the end, I'll remember to do a minute quiz. So, does anyone get any questions? And anyone else got any questions?
What experience do you have now that you think could help with the
I'll start with kind of what experience I have. So this year I've been the BL Netball president, and I've kind of used that role to get a better understanding of what use that experience and build on it. I obviously don't know kind of what it will completely be like, but I think I have a good idea, and through speaking to previous club sport officers, I think I can really kind of dive deep into the role. That kind of my main ideas, the first thing would be to kind of increase inter-sport engagement and support. So obviously through COVID, kind of I feel like people don't really know what other clubs are doing, there's not really as much support at games and so on. And so I think kind of utilising social media and tables to maybe put slideshows on and just kind of create a bit more hype around the achievement and successes of all the sports clubs would just create a better atmosphere and kind of help.
So inclusivity in sports is talked about quite a lot. To engage certain students in clubs, what do you think? That's the first one. Has anyone else got any questions to ask?
Sustainability in sport in terms of not environmental sustainability, but long-term success of clubs is under scrutiny with decreasing block. Got any ideas about what we might do to? We have obviously different pots of funding. Is there anything you might want to thrive in potentially difficult financial circumstances?
I was asking about diversity and inclusivity, and also maintaining sustainability. Okay, so a minute and a half.
I think, obviously I'm a bit biased, but I think netball is one of the most inclusive clubs at Barts in terms of ability. We have 9 teams from the ones, and we have 4 teams in development, and I'm not actually entirely sure kind of how many other clubs also have development teams. That's been a way that we've been able to welcome everyone into the sport, whether they've played before or just kind of have an interest or just want to get people involved from not only just from a range of abilities but also from a range of backgrounds. So if that's something that we can introduce to some sports clubs that don't have development teams or kind of like a social team kind of aspect, that would definitely help with inclusivity. And in terms of sustainability financially, there was something at the beginning of this year that I didn't really hear much more about, and that some clubs could have applied to get kind of extra help from Club Sport, in which they would have had extra strength and conditioning training and kind of more just like support their higher teams throughout in the leagues. And I think if we were able to offer that to smaller clubs as well, who may not even be in like tier A or first tier of their respective, just being able to offer that service of maybe helping them find a coach or just having a general coach that can give more teams like strength and conditioning, their long-term sustainability. Yeah, I think why I want to be BL's sports officer is that in my time at Barts, sports has been a big part, or if not the biggest part of my uni experience, and that's something that I think a lot of people can share with me, and I just want to make everyone's experience in sport a lot better and obviously contribute to their uni experience. And one thing I did forget to mention just now was that I think this year a lot of clubs experience quite inexperienced committees just because of COVID and not having as much exposure. So I think just having more support within clubs and more discussions about what's been going on well and what's not going well, and being able to incorporate kind of what's been working.
Let know your name and your course.
I'm Tamara, and I'm a third-year medical student. Hello, guys.
I'm James, and I'm a third-year medical student.
Clinical rep. So Rafa and James are on a joint ticket, so your time you've got to split.
Issues concerning placement, and how would you resolve these?
Or was that the same?
Same question.
Brilliant.
Recently, there's been a lot of societies running their own intercalation talks for like helping people get into it. Why is that? And to make it a BLSA wide one rather than letting clubs and societies run their own, because it's a bit confusing if you've got.
We're going to start with tomorrow on this one. So the questions were about the biggest place of intercalation talks that societies do. So you've got a minute and a half just for you to answer. Okay, tomorrow?
Okay, so placements, firstly. So there's been lots of issues around sort of equality of teaching at the different placements, whether out firms or in firms, firstly, and also the number of days that people are on placements, either 5 days or 2 days. So I think it's a difficult one, and I think we really need to work on it. So firstly, I need to collect feedback so that we have concrete evidence for staff, to be able to present to staff at various meetings. And then I would work with the leads at the individual placements, because from course rep meetings I have noticed that they are quite receptive to feedback and wanting to improve things, so I would do that. The second question about intercalation talks. So I think it should be made universal, yes, because I don't really think it's fair that some people should have access to certain talks, and I think also lots and lots of different talks is really difficult to have. Maybe one society is doing it on one evening and the others on the other evening. So I would, if possible, well, I think this year we will general SSLC meetings. I'm not entirely sure where we were up to on that, so I think maybe that would help be able to, if we got a rep, and if I were elected, I would definitely make sure that we had one.
And that was time. So the same two questions.
Mara said, there have been a lot of disparities in terms of placement because of the timetable, so some students have 5 days and other 2 days, and not everyone feels like they're benefiting from their time at a hospital, and others feel like that wastes a lot of time in terms of also revision and increases their tiredness, especially during exam season. So this is something that we want to work on, and there have been a lot of discussion already going on with the university. What we need to ensure is that the students are consulted upon this, because we want the students to be forced to do either of the two things without them being consulted. That's one thing. And secondly, we would like to standardise the teaching as well, because a lot of students feel like they're not gaining enough knowledge or experience from their placements because of the disparities in which they're taught. And this is again another point of our manifestos where they can check. So placement is definitely an important issue. And integrated placement, another thing as well, the fact that a lot of students are repeating their specialties and not experiencing any other specialties. So this is quite unfair as well, as other students are. So this again is something that we'd like to work on to ensure that they get a wider experience.
Yeah, and in terms of integrated degrees, I think there is a fairness of different societies running it because it gives a different experience of different students in different courses, and also it increases the number of talks available. If there was only one talk on one night and students were not able to make that, by having different societies run different ones, as long as they are open to all students, which they usually are, it allows students to gain multiple insights for multiple degrees and also have more opportunities. And also I have been working with the head of integrated degrees this year to improve the QM integrated degree pair.
SSLCs, but how would you go about making sure that students' voices are heard?
How would you go about encouraging students to raise concerns in terms of more sensitive issues that are happening?
We're going to start with James and Racker in this one. So it's about student voice in SLCs and also about getting students to raise concerns about sensitive issues. So a minute.
So regarding SLCs, probably experience in the previous roles that we've done this year, we have a lot of experience of how to gather feedback and how to present to the university to make sure that they actually consider the students' voice and make a change up in it. So what we do is send anonymous feedback from all students, and we look through them by the one, every single submission. And then we analyse it. We either send it to QM Democracy and Representation that helps with the analysis, or we analyse it ourselves and then we present it to the SSLCs with the course reps, but also different committees that are that make these changes. So if it's an issue with assessments, we go to the medical assessment committee and so on. And this has worked very well this year because feedback forms have gathered more than 500 submissions by the students because they felt like their voice was being considered. And what our aim is to actually ensure that this is the environment that the students feel they're in as well for the next years, for the clinical students as well. So that's again something we worked on.
And in terms of raising concerns on placement, there's a lot of students who have not been doing this, and I've had multiple students come to me about this, and I feel we need to increase our checking on students, especially those on ALF who feel like they are far away from all QM resources to be able to access this help. And I know a lot of it is online, but they feel a bit alienated out there. So I feel like module leads, especially for the older years, and hospital leads need to work to increase the engagement in the student community at that hospital, but also signpost them to where they can go to get help and raise concerns.
Time. And the second question was about how do we encourage more students to raise concerns about sensitive topics.
So I think the only thing we can do is ask for feedback. So we can do this verbally or in feedback forms. I think it is really difficult. I sent out a feedback form, I think, on Friday for the SSLC, and I only got 4 responses. So I think if I were elected, I would make a transparent platform where we can maybe collect an Instagram account to know who exactly the reps are, because never really seems is the person who is a rep, and there isn't really any sort of a poster outside who reps are. And the concerns with the relevant people involved. In terms of raising concerns, I think it's a really important issue. I've had quite a few conversations about it with some of the Women in Health SOC committees, and I think quite a and they've worked really hard for that. But I think it's an element of trying to sort of promote this and also show people that it is a safe environment and that we are, as a medical school, really receptive, and we want to know and we need to know in order for us to be able to do something for the people. And in order for that to happen, we need them to come forward. We need to know about their issues, and I think by promoting such documents and safe spaces.
There's any questions?
I was going to say, so obviously the jump between second and big. So what extra support?
On my own. This year, education, we've had blended learning, we've had mixed mode education. What do you think that we should be lobbying the university for based on education for lectures and exams for next academic year? So the first question is about the jump from, I'd say, pre-clinical to clinical years, and then the second one is about what we kind of lobbying for next year based on mixed mode education. So if I can start with you this time, Tamara. What do we need to give students
Support,
jumping
right,
from
okay.
pre-clin to clin
Yeah,
years,
that's
so second to third?
Okay, so part of the year was really online, but I know that maybe the university's made some changes. I think we again need to create the feedback for the students to show them that they can raise a concern if they feel that they maybe aren't being supported. And I think older years can play a big role in this as well. So I know it's difficult because some people aren't able to access, like in Freshers Week, certain societies or a society like the Mummies and Daddies thing. So I think we need to really be checking in with students a lot more. And I think we could do this by the student reps, but also within societies. In terms of
Online education.
online education, I think it's important that we continue a approach, but we need to be sure that everyone can access it, because I think there's a lot of value in having some online teaching, because it means it is more accessible to people, and that is in terms of education. But so in terms of lobbying, I think it comes down to what the students.
About the support that we would give to students going from second to third year, and the second question was about, this academic year we've had blended and mixed mode education. What do you think we should be lobbying the university for next year's academic offer?
jump between second and third year. Well, being a second year myself, I'll be experiencing that jump as well. But also, the preclinical students, so those sixth formers going into year one, we run an event called About Medical School, which was a crash course and a Q&A as well, that helped that transition. And what we aim is to do that for the future third years as well, to make sure that their questions or any queries they have about the clinical years are answered, and at the same time to reassure them before they start. So this is one thing. So an event that we will plan to do in the first week of September, hopefully. But in terms of also gaining feedback as well, frequently, again to make sure that whatever queries the students have are answered as well.
Of sort of online versus in person, we've seen a lot of issues this year with having exams online, in which the university are having to implement methods to prevent cheating, which have actually caused detrimental effects to students with the potential addition of linear progression exams. And so I think it's very key that we get exams back in person, back how they used to be run. In terms of teaching, I feel like that is best kept in a mixed mode with both online and in person being available, because it makes it accessible to everyone, and everyone does lectures at in different ways and at different rates, and I feel like people can play to their strengths by having it available in whatever format they want. The only thing I would say on that is that we need to improve the engagement with, not improve the engagement, improve the quality of in-person and online lectures, because when they're supposed to be teaching.
Fab. So there is a third candidate who wasn't able to be here today, but we have got a statement that Alan's going to read out.
Hi all, I hope you're all doing well and enjoying the debate thus far. I'm extremely sorry I could not attend this evening's event. However, I do hope you've been able to read my manifesto and pledges online, whether that's through the QMSU website or social media platforms. If I were to be privileged enough to be elected into such a role, I can guarantee I would work tirelessly for the Barts student community, doing my utmost to best try to ensure everyone's feedback, needs and questions are met and acted on accordingly. Additionally, I genuinely aspire to work with the university and other reps to help improve communication and transparency to all students, to ensure everyone understands and is informed of the university's plan for their education, as well as in general. This includes the rebranding of Barts. This is a topic I'm especially passionate about and can only hope to be given the opportunity as your next clinical rep to continue and aid to the great work that is already being carried out. Thank you all for listening, and remember to vote on the 28th of February.
Got a minute for a closing statement.
So we've both been in education reps. I've been for 2 years and Rugby for 1 year. So we both have a very good understanding of how the education committees work and a good idea of how to promote a real positive change and the correct hoops to sort of jump through to make these changes. By running as a joint ticket, it allows us to be able to share the workload, which we know what it's like, and will allow us to continue this role in a much more effective manner and ensure that all students feel represented.
That the students here are receiving, and we're aiming to not just make this their education as they wish, but also to use this role to make a positive impact to all students at Barts in London. And more importantly, also we value the trust that any of the people that will vote for us put in us, and we will work very hard to honour that. And we're very resilient, and we work very hard also to make sure that the voices of all students are taken into consideration seriously. So thank you very much, and we hope to have your vote and check our manifesto for years.
Thank you.
1 minute closing statement.
So I just wanted to finish by highlighting the key things that I will bring to the job. Firstly, communication with colleagues, with committee members and student representatives. Secondly, transparency. I will create coherent feedback loops to ensure that students are not only listened to, but I feel that their concerns are being addressed and also resolved. To initiate a fundamental rethink on what practical steps can be taken to health issues. I will also bring with me an easy air, friendliness, openness, my ability to work with others in a constructive and collaborative way. I really care about you, I care about your experience at Barts, and I want to contribute to making our education and life at Barts the best it can be. A strong, effective and compassionate representation.
So Sophia, third year medic. Siobhan, also third year medic.
Fair. So, again, has anyone got any questions? Yes.
Hello.
That's it. Hello.
Hello.
See within our curriculum to actually represent LGBT.
So the two questions were about plans for LGBT History Month and then changes into the medical curriculum. We can start with
Okay, so firstly, so LGBT History Month is what we're waiting for as LGBT students every year. And I believe that thus far it's been looking really great. So I'd like to continue the form that it is in. The only change I would do maybe increase the number of events and make it more accessible to students. I think this year people couldn't attend really because of COVID and we're not really sure how that will change in the future. But hopefully we can continue doing that as well. And the other question was changing the curriculum. So in my manifesto I really highlighted the importance of using an inclusive language with the clinical skills. And I feel like some students are not really informed on how to interact with people who identify as LGBTQ patients, especially on placement. So I think that as a change, I would say increase the teaching and also liaise with the staff to make sure that the change is actually put in place. Thank you.
and then the same.
Same thing, like I would want events like happening on like a weekly basis and also like different types of events, like because personally, like for me it was like some events were like drag people love, and then some events like make like in like just people, LGBT people spending time with each other, but then also with allies, like just different groups of people. I think it would be really nice, and especially in terms of like history, actually like really educating people about the importance of people in like queer history and the impact they've had on like our society. I think would be nice to have like in terms of like a newsletter, like. And then in terms of like curriculum, I like this really like gets to me is that when, especially at Barts, when we learn about like LGBT curriculum, it's like sometimes like being gay is part of like the case study, and it really annoys me because it's like it's just part of life. So I think just like talking to staff and educating them, like having workshops, I'd like to have like with actual staff and tell like, because even staff don't know how to interact with LGBT students. So like educating from that high level, I think would be really important to. I don't know. Nice game, guys.
With the student union or just within the Barts community, and how does it translate to maybe your future and new projects that you're thinking?
And what's your biggest aim for the year ahead if you were to go?
So Shivan first, it's about aim for the role.
So in terms of like, so I'll just start like general experience. Like I was a Young Stonewall ambassador and Metro ambassador, and like even in like school, I like educated teachers outside to like tell them about how to interact with LGBT students and like being inclusive. In terms of like just at Barts, like I'm on committee for drama, so like I have roles and like being organised and stuff like that. So putting those two roles together, I think makes quite a nice LGBT rep in terms of experience, because like I've done quite a lot of that. And then the second question was aims. So I think personally, I haven't seen a queer, a person of colour who's like queer LGBT rep since I've been at Barts, and that's something that like I feel like I could represent because there's so many people of colour at Barts, and I think my aim is to kind of make that clear, that there was like the intersectionality part of it, that like just because you're gay doesn't mean everyone has the same experience, and being like gay and a person of colour is very different, and I think having that like message across, I think is something that's really important to me, and that's like an aim.
So can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, of course. So the first one was about what's your experience to role that you would bring, and the second one is what was your one biggest aim that you could bring to the role?
Okay, so in terms of experience within Barts and the societies, I am a member of a committee in Pediatric Society since my first year of med school. So I'm currently as the vice president of the society, as well as social sec and for Alpine Society and preclinical academic officer for the course. So being a member of the committees taught me how to collaborate with other people. And I think teamwork and being approachable is really important. And as a LGBT representative, that means you have to be approachable for people. And also being able to work with other welfare reps, like men rep or women's rep, to make community here at Barts more inclusive for everyone and more approachable. And the other question was my biggest aim. I think my biggest aim is to improve LGBT students' experience at Barts, because I feel like Barts' LGBT community is very diverse and very unique. So by incorporating every single person and feeling that they belong and they're accepted for who they are, I think it would be great if that would be possible for me next year.
Are there any more questions? Any other questions in the room? We go to closing statements. Sophia, would you want to go first on this one? So 1 minute closing statement.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, I think that Barts is such a varied and unique place to be, and everyone is different. Here even in this room, every single person has a different background and different experience. But I feel like coming together and uniting over what we have in common is really important. And through my work, if I will be elected next year, if you decide that I'm worth doing the role, I'd like to make sure that everyone feels that they belong and they're accepted, and we just can have fun living the best lives at uni.
And Julian, again, 1 minute closing statement.
I would like LGBT people to again like feel accepted and not feel kind of like stereotyped in their groups or whatever, and like especially in Barts, like to be honest, in East London there is a lot of homophobia, and I think it's not something that we should shy away from. Like people are mean, and I think it's our like role to educate people. Like people have come from different backgrounds, and not everyone's okay with gay people. But I would like to educate those people. That doesn't mean like we have to like stand them down, you know. So I think that's one of my like key things, is just to be open and have those honest conversations that not everyone's going to be loving and accepting, but we can kind of get there with a bit of education, and I think that's what I really want. As well, so that we can just do it on like a wider range. In terms of like also community, like I said this in my manifesto, so you should read it. But like other unis like UCL and Imperial, and like having like a group Pride Week mixer, and just like
no, it's fine.
Thank you. Oh my god.
Thank you very much, both. Means we're going to drop some of the formalities and have a bit more of a sit down chat. Yeah, you were not have a break.
Back to get the
So this bit is a lot more of a relaxed, less formal, kind of just to delve a little bit more deeply into questions. You don't have to be too worried about time. I know you are wanting to leave, but you don't have to be as worried about time. We're not going to put a minute 30 on anything. So again, I've got a couple of questions. I'm very keen not to use those and actually to use things in the room. Has anyone got any questions?
Shall I introduce myself?
Yeah.
I'm the current LGBT rep. I'm supposed to be here with Numa, but she's got COVID, so she can't be here. We're running for VP Welfare at Barts. Yeah, she's a third-year medical student as well. Yeah, that's it.
Now questions. Has anyone got any questions for Amelia? Yeah.
Oh, are we not?
Sorry. Oh, let's do one at a time. One at a time, if that's all right. So, why did you decide to work together?
So there's a few reasons. One, welfare I think is like a really big role, and it's quite hard to keep track of all of the things at once. Like there's advocacy and also running events, and it takes a lot of effort. Like just being LGBT rep, doing one issue and advocating on that requires like hundreds of emails, and I'm not exaggerating. So like having two people to be able to do that, I think is a really good idea. So we can like spread out the workload. Also, Numa has loads of experience on BSA. Like she's VP Barts this year. She's been on BSA for years. I'm LGBT rep, so I feel like together we have a lot of experience that's quite good for the role. Like I have more welfare experience and she has more just BLSA in general experience. So yeah, those are the main reasons.
Okay. Fab. Yeah. If there are any other questions.
So I can talk about welfare issues from LGBT rep, and then there's just generally. So for LGBT rep, I've been trying to get them to change the name change system. Probably anyone on BLSA board is bored of me moaning on about this by now, but basically trans students can't change their names without having ID, and it makes it very difficult because in lessons and on teams and things like that, they're constantly being misgendered and being called by their old name, and it's very difficult to change these things. They've changed it for all of the other students, but not medical and dental students. Even though we've now passed a thing at Student Council, it's still very slow, but we are getting there. Chloe Orkin is onto it. So yeah, that's one thing that's been very annoying to me this year. In general, we really want to like educate and like consult with students on report and support, because I think, I mean, as you mentioned earlier, people don't use it, and I think there are a lot of reasons for that. I think people don't know what it is, they don't know how it works, and they don't know like what actually happens and what it can give you. And I think there's probably lots of other issues as well, and that's why we want to consult with students on it and actually like see why people don't use it and how we can improve it, because it's a really important part of university that it's not used, and people don't think that anything's going to happen as a...
I could delve a little bit more deeper into that bit. So talking about kind of issues that you find from students, one being the name change this year and people not necessarily knowing that much about report and support, raising concerns, how would you get that feedback? How would you get that student voice to figure out what the problems are?
Do you mean like how to hear from students, or like how to tell people about what they've said?
Let's do both, but I meant how do you get that in from students?
Yeah, so I mean, there's obviously the welfare social media. That was another thing on the manifesto. We want to make that a bigger thing and make that like make more out to societies and welfare reps and societies to see what they would like get them to consult their society members as well. Also just generally, I didn't realise for ages that we can use the mailing list and just email everyone. So like we can use... Yeah, I actually think people do care about it. Everyone I've talked to about it, they seem quite annoyed that the university doesn't have a better system, and it's just, yeah, they just don't know how. So just generally having welfare forums with all.
Any other questions, Lucy?
So as well.
For the weeks, I mean, I didn't realise that we could change the week specific ones, so that's a good thing. So we should probably think about that. But I definitely want consent week to be a bigger thing. I know a few years ago there was like a consent play and everyone really loved that. So like doing something like that again, or just generally getting more people to come to the consent things and making it more. There's like just a training event. Yeah, also just, I think the weeks could have more events in if like we involved more people. So like having more communication with the welfare reps so that we can have them collaborate more and organise events with us.
Any other questions, Bob?
You kind of touched on it at the end of this answer. But yeah, I just want to ask, it's more from the BNSA board point of view, so obviously welfare is quite a big role. It's also a bit managerial in the sense that you're lots of different reps. I was wondering how do you want to communicate with those reps? How do you want to make sure they have adequate support, and maybe how would you share that between you and everyone?
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing because as LGBT rep, I feel like there's a lot of things that you just don't get told, and you're just sort of there trying to figure it out. And then, especially for Black History Month, it being so early in the year, so quick to have to like organise all of that stuff. So we definitely want to have like regular welfare meetings with all the welfare reps. So we really want to have a welfare forum that's with all of the reps, not just like individual ones for the reps. So then we sharing feedback from all the students as well. Yeah, and just generally, I think me and Numa can share out that between like, we want to at least meet together, all three of us, for like.
Any other questions? Yeah.
What does
That's a very good question. So I think the main thing is people feeling safe and included at university. So yeah, just making sure to include all students. So like one of the things on is to like include mortar and commuters. I know in Freshers there was a board games night for people who didn't want to go to more things like that. I think that would be really good. And then, yeah, just people feeling safe and feeling like they have somewhere to turn when there's an issue. So making sure that all the welfare reps for the society signpost people to, and like make sure that you know, they're actually providing a good welfare role to their society. And yeah, just generally advocating to the university students to make sure everyone's. Yeah, so I think the main thing would be to just publicise it and make a commuter specific one. Maybe there can be a mummies and daddies scheme where you get placed with other people that were commuters, like they weren't in halls, because maybe that would allow them to share more experience and things. And also just like if there are more interesting events happening on Daddy, I feel like a lot of people join mummies and daddies on the whim. They go at the last minute and just join the queue to, you know. I feel like if there was a fun event that commuters could go to that they actually want to go to right after that, then they'll be around. And yeah, but I think the main thing is want to come and do it.
I guess on a sort of question based on that, with mummies and daddies, have you thought, or BL families, have you thought about any improvements that you want to do to the matching from both parents to kids?
So I know that they do non-drinking and drinking, but yeah, as I was saying, maybe having commuter-specific ones would be a good idea, and maybe there could be more questions about people's interests or like what societies they're in and things like that. Maybe there could be like more interest in sports and things like that, because I know my parents, they're very nice, but like we weren't really interested in the same things, so we didn't really like meet up very much after the first bit. So maybe something like that. We could have a sports specific one and then maybe a sports ones. I mean, yeah, we need to think about that, but there definitely should be more questions to match people.
How about we do 1 minute closing statements? Yeah, 1 minute.
Now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, well, okay.
Sorry.
No.
So yeah, me and Numa running for welfare, we'd really love to do it. Yeah, our main things are just to improve welfare, like presence and like organisation, make students feel more heard. We want to make sure that welfare presence at Freshers' Fair is much more. We want to, like, one of the main things is we want to improve support for the other welfare reps to make sure that we can share, that we've learned the hard way, that we can just tell the welfare reps so they can, like, they don't have to go through months of emailing to find it out. We really want to make students feel much safer at university, so things like support and yeah, that's how much people know about it. Yeah, improving use of that.
And time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Also,
I'll plug it at the end. I'll plug it at the end. So, the candidate for BLC President, Charlie, isn't able to be here today, so I believe Alvin's got a statement.
How's it going?
So,
it's a little more nice, it's a little more relaxed. I apologise to all that I cannot be with you tonight. Unfortunately, I work Friday evenings and was unable to find cover. Hustings is always the highlight of every campaign season, and so for me to miss it is a huge shame, but I hope the rest of the evening has been as interesting as it has been every year. I'm hugely passionate about representing the BL student body, and with my collective experience in multiple sports and society committees, I truly believe that I'm the right person for the role. The BL name and community is at risk, and it will be my utmost priority to ensure that the student voice is heard and represented at discussions regarding the Whitechapel campus and the future of the SMD. My greatest policy points involve education reform to reflect the diversity of BL, the streamlining of club sport financing, and of course the continuation of the We Are BL campaign that started this year. More than anything, I'm open to hearing your thoughts. I'm contactable through email or through my campaign's Instagram, @Charlie4BLPres, and I would love to hear your thoughts. I want to work for you, the students, and would love for you all to put your faith in me for BLSA President next year. Thank you.
So, next we are doing VP Barts.
Yeah.
do quick introductions.
I'm Annie May, or Annie, I don't mind. I am currently intercalating in pre-hospital medicine, so next year I'm going into 4th year, and I am running for VP Barts this year.
Thank you. So, has anyone got any questions? Any questions in the room? That's okay. Let's start with one that I've got. So, a lot has obviously changed since COVID. One issue we've had, quote unquote, post-COVID is about event planning. How do you think communication can be better between the SU, BLSA, societies, clubs? How do you think that event planning could be improved?
So I have first-hand experience of this. As RAG officer, I have found it very difficult this year engaging with the QMSU events staff. Running events, I often feel like there are a lot of barriers for students wanting to run events and people in these roles wanting to run events, especially when it's for charity. And I feel like we have seen some improvement. I think the first thing was to say that there is an issue here. It was very easy to just kind of sit back and just think, oh no, that's a barrier, I can't tackle that. Whereas I decided, no, actually we should be able to do this. I'm going to try and persist, and things have worked out. So we've raised the issues that we've had, and I think that's really important. It's not an issue of like stepping back and just kind of not doing anything. We have to at least try. But I also think being very transparent in that communication is important. And after some of these events have happened, and we've had some issues with communication, we've had debrief meetings, and I found these really useful with the staff to talk about the issues that we came across and how we can improve them in the future. And I'm not sure that other representatives have been having these meetings, so I think kind of advocating them would be a good idea because I found them useful when these incidents have happened.
Projects that they may like to do on the side. Do you have, for example, Grace did like a BL Champions scheme. Yeah, people just did their own little things. So do you have any ideas of what you want to do next year?
I think a lot of my kind of ideas are related to ENTS and RAG, which are the kind of people that I would be supporting in this role. So I have some ideas there of how I could support those representatives best. In terms of RAG, something I've really noticed this year is we've kind of lacked engaging new students to engage in the RAG committee, and so I'd really like to work with the RAG officer to improve that, and hopefully we can come up with some kind of scheme there. I also think collaboration between sports, societies, volunteering, RAG improved, and I feel like I could be a really good person to kind of connect those things together, and so I'd like to put on events that incorporate all of those things. So we've done some this year, like water polo tournament for RAG, there's a hockey tournament for RAG, but what would be really nice is to include volunteering in that as well. And I did really want to do that as a volunteering officer, but COVID. So that is something I'd love to do, and I feel like I'd be a good point of contact to kind of bring those things together and coordinate quite a big event between those different.
If I can add on to that, so you talked a bit about as VP Barts with RAG and ENTS and the kind of committees below you. Another massive part about being a VP is, of course, flagship event planning. Is there anything that you'd want to improve, any changes, any additions, that you want to add to like the flagship events that we currently do?
So I obviously haven't been to any flagship. Well, I haven't been to the graduation events, which is something I have quite a few ideas for. One idea I had is kind of a showcase of our finalists. So like the pictures that accumulate throughout people's year at BL is massive, through like sports and societies and volunteering. And I think what would be really nice is for those groups to have an opportunity to talk about their finalists and say, oh, look at them as a fresher. And I think that'd be a really nice thing that people would enjoy, that finalists would enjoy, and that people still at BL would enjoy. So I'd like to investigate how we could maybe incorporate that into the flagship event, or if that's not possible, maybe like a led event where we showcase our finalists and how far they've come. Would be a really nice idea, to actually see like images of what they've been doing while they were here, rather than just a person or just words.
Next year is the 900th anniversary of St. Bartholomew's Hospital. What would be your plans to sort of honour its heritage and celebrate?
So I think a really effective way of celebrating heritage is through like social media campaigns, and I think we've really seen how influential that can be, in like the different LGBT weeks and Black History Month weeks. So I think it'd be really nice to for BL to run a social media campaign that talks. Our campaign for We Are BL, and it would be a really good opportunity to show why BL is so important to us as students and students in the past.
Mentioned We Are BL then. If we can touch on branding, because I think I've heard in the paper it's been a problem.
Really?
Yeah, I was looking at the Times once and it was, yeah. What do you think is next steps with?
I think, so from the meeting we had, I think it was, what came across to me was very important, is that students' voices aren't necessarily being heard, and kind of the management's idea of what we want is not actually what we want. Various things. But I think what would be really good is kind of collating the thoughts and opinions of the BL students, which I think is what has happened, and making sure that is heard, because yeah, it could easily get misinterpreted for make sure that we're all on the same page with that, and far in this campaign it gets
Any other questions, Bart?
Okay, I need to phrase this right. Okay. So obviously with the whole rebranding thing, we all know it may jeopardize all of our flagship events, and I was wondering what would your approach be in discussions about this?
discussions
With like staff or the university about them, for example, wanting us not to do association thing.
I think we have to be very careful in our approach. I think these discussions need to be very civilized, and we need to devise what we want to say before we go and say it, because I think it could very easily, a lot of us are outraged at the fact that these events might not happen. But I think coming across as outraged is not the way we should deal with it. And they are far more likely to listen to us if we come together, devise our approach, we have strategies, we have evidence to back it up, we have reasons, and I think that will be far more effective in achieving what we want. Slamming our fists down.
Little smile from Val. Last question, do you want to ask?
Yeah, last question. Okay. It's again regarding branding. So obviously there's a campaign happening now. It's been happening for a month, but more intensely recently. I was wondering, no campaign is perfect. So I was wondering, what do you think? Like, what
I think maybe just the time it took to develop the campaign. Obviously, everyone was very busy, and I think there was so much momentum in the beginning, and students really backed us, and then everyone kind of just waited for something to happen. And I think in the ideal world, that would have been set up as soon as that momentum gathered. We'd ask people to be doing stuff, but I don't think that was. You have to do them properly. There's no point rushing it and doing something wrong. So that.
How about we move on to 1 minute closing statement? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Fab, so you've got 1 minute.
So I think in my roles as volunteering officer and as RAG officer, and lots of my roles in BL, I have shown that I put 100% into any job I do, and this would be no different, because if I care about something, I'm going to work at my hardest to do it the best I can, and I really care about BL. That's why I'm passionate about the We Are BL campaign, and I think that I would put my all into that, and I hope that you will have.
Thank you very much. Now, the last candidate of tonight is for the London. Woo! Fab, if you want to do a quick introduction.
Last time I was here, I didn't introduce myself.
I remember we all laughed at you.
Hi guys, I'm Liam. I am an intercalating medic. Yeah, I've been here for years now.
Fab, is there any questions in the room?
On engagement this year. Okay, the BLSA as a whole has worked effectively through COVID, and we're coming out the other side of it. But we're in a stage now where we have to redevelop our engagement strategy and re-engage all of our students and our student groups effectively again. I wouldn't say COVID demolished community at Barts, but it did take a big hit, and we're starting to work through that now. But what Vavra did, my lad, not meant to name her, got the BLSA Societies Officer in 2020 to 2000. Was they created a societies bulletin, and that this year has unfortunately fallen off. But that was a great way for societies to advertise their events in one place. It was posted every week on the BLSA Societies page. It had all the links to the events, and although events won't be online anymore, they'll be in person. I intend that to be a LinkedIn, link on the not LinkedIn, Linktree on the bio. and the events and their details are all there in one space. I feel like a lot of our advertising for sports, for societies, is very congested. I'm on the 2018, 19, 20 and 20+1 medic group chats, and I know I'm not in all of them, but I've even muted every single one because it's just a constant stream of people advertising their events, and that gets lost. People lose events. You don't realise it, but it gets lost because you've got too many to look through. So if we have it in one centralised position, we'll be able to more effectively advertise to people, to students, and get engagement student groups up again. I'm also looking to maybe implement a whole BLSA Societies calendar where it's a shared Google Excel sheet, and basically instruct society presidents to not mess each other up and put events on the same night, because it's frustrating when someone puts in so much effort for an event, they've got a keynote speaker, and then unfortunately another society who haven't got that same keynote speaker, their attendance suffers. There have been some really great events this year from societies. We've had, for example, the orthopaedics, they've produced a whole workshop, a whole set of workshops and talks, and that sort of thing that hasn't gained the traction maybe that it could have done. They've got a whole set, and the advertising has been good, but it could be taken to that step further by having it in one centralised place where people are able to access everything. And that's one of the other things. I also would like to focus on operations as a whole in the BLSA. I think there's a couple of things that maybe could be straightened out, mainly towards engagement, advertising. But I think parts of the BLSA building could do with a little bit of work. I think we could maybe look at the ties on the wall. I know this is really predictable, but the ties on the staircases, they could be updated. We've got some new ties from other clubs, put them on the walls. We've got the cabinets behind in the griff with all these historical sports teams. Maybe let's get that for Barts 900 and that sort of thing.
Any other questions in the room? So you talked a lot about some of the bits that are really important as your role at BP London, the bits undo sports and societies. Another massive part of the role is supporting the BLSA president. What do you think is one of the biggest aspects that you want to do with that next year?
Support, but challenge. Not a yes man. I have my own opinion, and I have enormous respect for the candidate for the BLVP coming in, but I'm going to support him, but I'll also challenge him on aspects where I feel we can improve and do better. I'm a bit of an admin junkie. I absolutely love it, but that's what I think I'll be very, very good at, is organising things in specific ways, in allowing us to be able to be effective in our organisation. Is there anything specific you're looking for me tonight? Not to say, but to answer, because support's quite a big word.
It is. No, you're right. I guess. I don't like it this way around.
Yeah.
You kind of answered some of it, but also just workload. It's really, really tough, and thinking that you are simultaneously have your own projects, like what I've kind of asked before, but there's also that going. Actually, the BLSA president thing is so humongous and stressful.
I think I agree. So I think SPC is a really important part. We need to be effective in our delegation of tasks at SPC. I think obviously the candidate for the BLSA president will be very good at making sure people are delegated and also making sure people are sticking to time. But I think I've proven in my other two roles that I'm good at sticking to time. I get my job done, and I'm organised in doing so. And I believe that so that delegation, not taking on too much as well, is important, because I think it needs to be delegated throughout the entirety of SPC, and also knowing where our limits are. We have our own sub-teams to manage. So managing our own sub-teams as VPs will also take some work away from the BLSA president as well, so they don't have to maybe meet with the sports officer, the societies officer as regularly. Maybe it's just a 15-minute catch-up rather than a whole hour, and that takes some workload away from the president.
In the room.
Rob asked this question to Annie before, but I was wondering if you have any ideas about flagship events or improvements.
I'm not. It's a bit of a strange time to be rewriting the wheel. I think we look at feedback from years gone by. We look at what people enjoyed. Again, The only flagship I've actually been to is association dinner in first year, and I was a first year, and it was like, whoa. So is about it, but I'm very, very open to looking at what's gone well in the past, what needs to be improved, and being quite critical of what we can do to help that. With flagship events, I think throughout the whole entire BLSA, one of my main points is calendar, organisation, date out. I think that's really, really important. I think if we get things booked early and dates released, people don't tend to, double book themselves. It's in the diary early, and that's just mainly the only thing that I'd be looking at being really, really hot on. In terms of improving the running of the event, nothing that I personally feel, but looking back at feedback is the main thing for me.
Any other questions in the room?
Obviously, like societies is having an impact. But what would you say, like post-COVID era?
I'd say working with Annie. My biggest challenge. Ooh, you've hit me there. Not that I'm not trying to be proud. And obviously branding's a big part of it. That's obviously a massive. Yeah,
Is that the next
that's
question?
yes, the next
I'll wait.
one. I feel as though campaigns have been lost. The meaning of them have been lost, and that's through no fault of anyone. That is because everyone is running a social media campaign for every single welfare campaign that we have, and I think that maybe we need to be a bit more proactive in organising events and working with the welfare team. But this is the whole, and as Amelia said earlier, putting some real focus in these weeks and putting some events on rather than just being an Instagram story, an Instagram post. And I'm the worst for it because I've encouraged my club throughout the entirety of all these welfare campaigns to make sure we keep spreading information. I'm not saying that's not important, but what is also important is ensuring we have events, have safe spaces for these discussions, these campaigns to take place. And it's changing the mindset and making sure we have that engagement in those events, and so they can actually go ahead in the future. So.
Any in the room? But can I go to someone else just because
Yeah.
I've got Adi?
Okay. So you hinted earlier about the idea of sort of that community feel beginning to wane a bit because of the pandemic, and I think also you sort of can see in the number of candidates compared to last year. So how do you feel like you'll go about getting more students engaged in the BLSA, I guess, and the BLSA?
BLSA is all about belonging and wanting to be felt wanted. That's why we have a community. Not begging people, but I think that sometimes, I've done it in our student groups, we don't always appeal to people in the same way. I think at the start of the year, what I want to do is I want to have an entire lecture theatre of all the student group presidents, discussion, a pretty frank discussion really, students from the bottom. I feel as though, I've said this a lot in BLSA board, I feel as though students identify with groups in the BLSA. They don't always identify with the BLSA as a whole because they don't understand the structure of it. And that maybe is just because we've lost some momentum through COVID, but also because they like their groups. They like their little family parts. So I think speaking to the groups at the start, okay, and almost not telling them what to do, discussion and looking at what other groups have done and what other groups can do in terms of the start of the year, sending out text messages to individual members, actually saying, we'd love to have you back this year. That goes a long way. A message come through that you're actually wanted by a society, by a club, who actually want to engage with you again. Your then chance of coming back. If I felt like I could do something, I could give something back to this organisation, then my engagement in that would then improve. And I think it's about feeling wanted and feeling like you belong, and how we make that sort of community feel come back and target what some people have called the grey area, where we lose students who come for education but don't engage the BLSA. And it's about, we've got the BLSA here, we've got the grey area here, and it's expanding across into the grey area. I'm good at this, aren't I? And expanding across into that grey area. And I think that comes from the roots of the tree expanding and growing outwards so we improve our reach into that grey area. Rob's looking like I've gone mad. I have. It's been a long day. I'm mad about to get into it.
I'm not. Is there any other questions in the room?
It's not a tree analogy, I don't want to hear it.
My question is, worst case scenario, we lose the name. What do you think would be the biggest challenge for BLSA as a body, and how?
You know what I'm going to say. I'm a staunch believer that the name's not going. But worst case scenario, it does. I think our challenge is, straight away at the start of the year, to make sure the freshers still identify the fact that they're still Barts in London. Simple as that. But that is a challenge, because with all the branding they come out of, the university is Queen Mary, Queen Mary, Queen Mary, Queen Mary. I think it puts extra emphasis on building the community of the BLSA and building the Barts in the London community. It's obviously going to put a strain on the BLSA as an organisation. I'm hoping that the majority of the BLSA board won't dissolve the BLSA board, so we will still have a BLSA. But also, we will be in a very strong bargaining position if the name goes, unfortunately. I mean, it's not a good bargaining position to be in, but it does give us other aspects. So, engagement, making sure the freshers know the institution they belong to, even though it's not recognised by the university executive. And I'm pretty sure I will still do that, Annie will still do that, and the other candidates for the BLSA board will still do that. I'm pretty sure the student groups who make up this fantastic community will do that as well.
London, you look at sort of three main sectors, which is sports, volunteering, societies. Do you feel all three of those sort of sectors of the student union are looked after? Equal aspects should provide more support.
And I think sports societies and volunteering sometimes go under the radar at Barts. By the way, Sarah, that sports isn't going to get my attention. Sports are a very special place in my heart. But I feel as though some of these roles also, and these also groups, they don't get the same support that's required. And that's why I'd like to work with the societies officer, again, to try and make sure the societies get all the support they do with the bulletins, the advertising spaces, the combined calendar to make sure we're not clashing, but also volunteering. As Annie said, we're looking to, one of our joint sort of ideas is to look to work towards making student groups collaborate in volunteering. Because obviously the volunteering groups we have at Barts are absolutely fantastic, but sometimes they lack huge numbers that we can get from other student groups and combine them together and do so much good for the community. It was one of my big aims in 2021 to really push that through when I was sports officer, but a certain virus had other ideas. But it was to make sure and encourage sports clubs to engage in other areas of BLSA. Sport makes up a huge proportion of the BLSA's time and student population, but that doesn't mean that it has to be prioritised over societies and volunteering. I'm not here to prioritise sport. I mean, I came from a sporting background, I'm not going to hide that, but every single one, in my eyes, is equal and needs the same support. Some maybe a little bit more in terms of numbers and engagement, but I'm not here to be sports officer 2.0.
I think for time, let's do your 1 minute statement. Say no. You've got 1 minute, okay.
The clock starts again. experienced, I'm organised, I've got some good ideas for next year. I want to improve this fantastic organisation. It means a lot to me. The Barts and London brand means a lot to me. I'm incredibly passionate. I'm running on a slate with one of my best friends. So I feel as though the two of us can do a really good job as VPs together next year. I've had the experience within the BLSA, sports officer, entertainment, and also running a student group. I think you've heard quite a lot about what I want to do. But yeah, I hope you vote for me, and I hope that I've tried to convince you enough that I'm the right person for the job.
Thank you very much. Wow, so that concludes, I'm going to stay sitting down. That concludes tonight. So we've heard from lots of the candidates, and just to remind everyone, for the uncontested candidates, they're still always wrong, reopen nominations. So even though we've talked sometimes tonight about one specific candidate, that is always wrong. Just to remind everyone, voting opens at 10 AM for elections on Monday. I'm sure you won't miss it, but it's qmsu.org/elections. You can find out more info.
When will the other manifestos be released? They're still...
I don't know. All the manifestos we have are on the website, but
the ROMs aren't up there.
Some of the ROMs
they're not there. There's just a manifesto unavailable for viewing.
I have to email to get my one.
okay.
We will cover that before Monday.
It'll definitely be up for Monday.
Before Monday 10 AM. So that's when voting starts. My next bit was you can read candidates' manifestos there. You will before Monday at 10 AM. And to see Charlie, who's running for BLC president, as well as the other QMSU exec officers, including the QMSU president, there's an executive officer question time on Monday. It's on Marland campus, David Sizer Lecture Theatre at 6:15. That's on Monday. It's also live streamed as well. So make sure to come there to find out more about the sort of wider university's issues to discuss. Results are Thursday at 7:30, which you can come to the result party in Drapers. And that's it. Thank you very much everyone for coming. Thanks for the SU staff who've been helping keep this afloat. And the very last thing to say is that the small plug is that there's an LGBT plus night in the Griff right now. So I hope lots of you come over and join. Thank you very much.